Hello again, everyone. This is the Alak Ahmed channel, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. My lesson today is another copycat lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. This lesson is titled Leftover Miracle, and it's December 3rd, 2020. Leftover miracle as in leftover food, and I'm going to talk about the miracles that Jesus did in the New Testament, feeding the 5,000, and there was one case where it seems he fed 4,000 as well. So 4,000 and 5,000 plus, women and children. Some people say these two miracles are the same. Some say they're different, but I'm just going for something else, so it doesn't really matter to me. But I want to first read here from the book of 2 Kings chapter 4 with Elisha, and then I'm going to show you again that this is just another copycat story in the New Testament when Jesus fed these many people. Again, showing that the New Testament doesn't have anything significant in terms of newness, freshness. It's just the same old stuff from the Old Testament that they're regurgitating in the New Testament. Like I said a long time ago, Jesus is coming with something fresh and new. Then subdue all the enemies of Israel while Israel is in captivity and can't go through their priesthood to get any goodness from God and so on, and they got no more king to fight and so on. And you be that king that you said you are, and that they praise you as, and pull off a deliverance from the Romans and from everybody else. Then now you're talking. Or do something new, like take the people that are following you so much, even just the 12 disciples, the inner ones, and show them heaven. Show them the mysteries behind the clouds. Do something new. But again, he's just copying something from the Old Testament. So let's look at it. From 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 42 to 44, Elisha is with the sons of the prophets. He's giving them some food to eat. They ate, and then someone else came and brought some more food. So now look at this. And there came a man from Baal Shalisha and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn in the husk thereof. And he said, Give unto the people that they may eat. And his servitor said, What? Should I set this before 100 men? He said again, Give the people that they may eat. For thus saith the Lord, they shall eat, and shall leave thereof. So he set it before them, and they did eat, and left thereof, according to the word of the Lord. So the servant was saying, how can I set this before the people? Like, should I set this before 100 men? It's not enough to feed so many people. But he says, go ahead and do it, because the Lord's going to work it out. They're going to eat, and they're even going to have leftovers. Now, let's run over to the New Testament, and we'll look now at Jesus feeding now. Okay, let's just read quickly the Matthew chapter 14 and verse 19 to 21. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass. Remember, he was teaching them for a long time, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat and were filled, and they took up the fragments that remained, 12 baskets full. Now remember, Elisha said they're going to eat and they're going to leave behind. So here now you see Jesus with another copycat story, a copycat miracle, with which they're using to sell the New Testament again, another miracle. Like he just came doing miracle after miracle like crazy just to make people buy the message in the New Testament. But the people in the Old Testament, they did a miracle occasionally when something was really needed and so on. They didn't overdo it. Their focus was on teaching the people and getting them to keep the Torah. Whereas Jesus is trying to get people to come and buy into his message by miracles. He's doing a tonload of miracles. And that's how they're trying to sell the New Testament. So when they'd eaten, there were about 5,000 men beside women and children. So they picked up the 12 baskets there with the 5,000 that were fed. Let's run over now to the book of Mark, chapter 8. I'll read a couple verses from here as well. You can read maybe verse 1 to 10. I'm just going to read maybe 4 or 5 of the verses. So Mark 8, I'll start with verse 1 and 2. In those days, the multitude being very great, and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples unto him, and saith unto them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now been with me 3 days, and have nothing to eat. Verse 4 to 5. And his disciples answered him, From whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? Now remember, that's just the same way as the servant, as Jesus has these disciples, they're going to be his servants now and serving the people too. And they're saying the same thing that the servant said to Elisha, can we set this bread before 100 men? You know, because it's not going to be enough, is what the servant was saying. Same thing they're saying here, where we're going to get all this food to feed all these people from, right? Like we're not going to have enough stuff to feed all these people. So from whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? And he asked them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7. Now let's run to verse 7 and 8. So this is the feeding of the 4,000 now. The other one was 5,000, 12 baskets. This one is feeding of 4,000 with 7 baskets. So verse 7 to 8. So they did eat and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets. And they that had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. So we see from that here that this is just really just another copycat miracle in the New Testament to make you have the feeling that you have when you read the Old Testament stories. Jesus and his disciples, they should have just left this stuff alone and, because it really looks bad on Jesus and these New Testament people. I'll tell you why. Jesus is just being a follower. He's following and mimicking the miracles of the Old Testament. But he says, he is the one, I am the I am, and so on, and all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Yet he's just being a follower, trying to get other people to follow him. But he himself is just a follower, following the pattern of what the Old Testament people did. He's not original. He's a copycat person, a copycat kind of teacher, and so on. He's not doing anything original. He's just copying stuff. And you can tell that he's really just a follower. Even his book comes at the end of this whole binding that we call the Bible today, because the Torah came first. So he's just following with his works behind what Old Testament people did. Jesus is just a follower himself. And that's no place for the leader to be, coming behind the Old Testament prophets and behind the Old Testament writings and so on. And then having a miracle that is behind the first or original type of miracle that he sees other people doing that I've pointed out in the past. Plus here again today with Elisha, feeding people and people saying, is this going to be enough? Now, if you read a little bit earlier, I didn't read it, but if you read 2 Kings chapter 4 from verse 1, you will see when he said, hey, let's get them some food to eat, when the men went out, they actually got some food. It was wild food, and they said earlier in the chapter, 2 Kings 4, is death in the pot, because they picked up some wild stuff that they said might have been something similar to cucumber, something like that, whatever it was. But it was some wild food, and there was death in the pot. He said, put more meal into it, more meal, and basically it worked out fine. They were all right. So notice here what Elisha was dealing with and the servants there in the school of the prophets. They were eating the food that was grown from the ground. Jesus now, he in his story offends again, because here he is feeding people with fish and loaves. Fish that according to the Torah he should not have been eating. He shouldn't have anything to do with that. So again, even though he is a copycat, he is sinning with it. He's consuming the fish. I know some of you don't like it. These are just the facts of the Bible. The Torah starts out in Genesis chapter 2 with his so-called father. He's saying the Most High is his father, but he's feeding the people fish when they're hungry. Why couldn't he work a miracle and feed them something better? Elisha, at least when he did his miracle first before Jesus, he fed the people from food that they picked out, that grows from the ground. They picked it from outside and brought it in and prepared it and boiled or cooked the food, right? But in Genesis chapter 2 here in verse 9, so we're talking, when you read Genesis chapter 1 and 2, of course you're dealing with the early creation story and, you know, the first things on earth and so on, according to the biblical view. And Genesis 2 verse 9, and out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Notice the tree of life is what it says. So people talking about God told Noah in, I think, Genesis chapter 9, that he can now start eating the meat, and telling St. Paul later and so on and whatever, and talking about Israelites eating meat before the Lord in their holy days and so on. Those things are sinful. They were transgressing. That's why no matter what they did, they could never make it. That's why they ended up into captivity by the end of the book. Because if you are always eating the meat before the Lord, you are constantly transgressing. And that changes your mind when you eat that stuff. It just changes you while you are sinning before the Lord. But he doesn't say the meat of life or the animal of life, the animal flesh of life and so on. But he said the tree of life. In other words, the thing that grows out of the ground that you should eat, that is the thing that gives life. So he calls it the tree of life. And he said it is good for food, means it is fitting for your food, it is right for you, for your body. It is the thing that I made for you to eat. This that grows off the ground is food. And you run down in the same Genesis chapter 2. Let's look at about verse 16. So he put the man in the garden, verse 15. And then verse 16 says, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree, not of every animal that is kosher, not of every animal that has no blemish on it, not of every animal that meets the dietary food laws that later come up in the book from Moses' mouth, that is sinful itself, but he commanded the man, saying, of every tree, not after you drain out the blood of every animal, but of every tree. So when Jesus feeding them the loaves and the fish and so on, the multitude, it doesn't say here of every fish that have scale or don't have scale and whatever, and you differentiate between this and that, and you drain out the blood and you squeeze out the blood out of the fish and whatever, then you can eat because you have now cleaned it up and blessed it and held it up before the Lord God of heaven. No, he says here to the man, he says, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. He says nothing about eating fish like Jesus was feeding the people and sinning, and nothing about eating the animals of the earth either. So people like a precept upon precept, line upon line. The first line he says, every tree that is good for food. That's what he made. And then he comes back here with it a second time now, and he says in verse 16, of every tree of the garden. Again, that's what you should eat. Thou mayest freely eat. Freely eat means there are no restrictions. So when you come in with dietary laws, from Moses and Noah, and then Noah coming onto the boat saying God said he can eat the meat and the animals, and then New Testament Paul saying this and whatever, and it's all right to eat it if you bless it and so on, but don't eat it in front of somebody who might be offended and so on. No, thou mayest freely eat this that grows out of the ground from the trees. Means there are no restrictions based on dietary laws that are complicated and you got to drain out the blood first, hang the animal upside down for overnight or however long they do it for, and make him drain out and whatever. Thou mayest freely eat this stuff that grows out of the ground, because this is food and it shall be meat for you. So people are transgressing all through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel and so on, all the way down to the last book in the Torah, and then all the way from Matthew to Revelation. People are transgressing and sinning by eating for Passover and all kinds of other feasts. They are sinning by eating all this meat before the Lord. And you're still sinning today, just like Jesus was sinning when he gave the people the meat to eat, the fish. So Jesus, a copycat person in the New Testament with his disciples, was going further and sinning. And I already told you a long time ago that Jesus sinned. And here again, another sin I'm showing you, that Jesus was getting the people to eat fish. And they were eating it in abundance. So much of it that they had many baskets left over of some of the food, right? The loaves. So I guess they wiped out the fish that they had from the boy. But it's still just a copycat system. I hope you can see that something is strange and fishy. If people are eating these stuff in the Old Testament, that's wrong because they went astray. Jesus should have been bringing something new and not giving the people the fish from the boy. He should have worked a miracle to get some food that is right. Work a miracle to make some things appear, or take one fruit that somebody might have had, or just pray a miracle and make some fruit appear and so on, and bless it to make the fruit multiply so that he can feed the people. He didn't do that. He multiplied transgressions. He multiplied the eating of sinful things, which on their own they are all right because God created them. He created the fish, so they're all right on their own, swimming in the sea. But when you start to eat them and then you pray to bless and multiply them, you are sinning. I'm giving Jesus no breaks with this one. No breaks. And I didn't even understand his sin with the eating that when I started the lesson here, recording the lesson. All I was focused on is that it's a copycat thing. He's copying the story from Elisha eating. But as I go through it, I see that, hey, wait a sec, he was giving the people fish to eat and blessing it to make the people, deceiving the people to make them think that God is a part of this. You can pray all you want in your church or your camp or wherever, and sound nice and spiritual and sanctimonious and everything like that, and sound set apart. But your prayers don't mean anything to God because they are prayers of transgression, leading people to do things that are not right. Jesus was sinning in this text, and the disciples participated in his sin. The New Testament is fake. It's a copycat system. Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, Yalak Emmett channel. Thank you for listening. Read it for yourself. 2 Kings chapter 4 with Elisha, and run over to Mark chapter 8. Thanks for listening.